video would be going to be on the different exercises to increase your thoracic mobility and also to reduce the stiffness over the thoracic region, which will also help you with the different exercises to get a full range and reduce the stress on your lower back. But before we start with this video, we have to understand why do we need thoracic mobility and what's the purpose behind doing these mobility drills. Because the aim of this channel is to not only give you the exercises but also make you understand the purpose behind that. So to understand the term thoracic, we have to first have a closer look into our spine. So as you can see here, the first 7 vertebrae, that is from C1 to C7, is known as the cervical region, and below that the 12 vertebrae, that is from T1 to T12, is known as the thoracic region, which will be the region of our concern in this video. And below that there are 5 vertebrae which ranges from L1 to L5, which is known as the lumbar region, which is generally found in the lower back. And below that there are 9 small bones which are fused together, which comprise of the sacrum and the coccyx. Now if we consider the mobility and the stability of these regions, then the cervical region is meant for mobility as well as stability, while the thoracic region is meant for mobility and the lumbar region is meant for stability. So it can be clearly seen that if you lack mobility at your thoracic region, then it will demand that mobility from your lumbar region. But the lumbar region is not meant for mobility, it is meant for stability. So if you demand mobility from that region, it will put excessive stress on the lumbar region, which might also lead to back pains, lower back pains. So we can conclude from here that the stiff thoracic region might also be a reason for your lower back pain. Now let's look into the functioning of the thoracic region to get a better clarity about the mobility drills which we are going to perform. So the thoracic region, which ranges from T1 to T12, I am approximately plotting them down. So it helps in the flexion and the extension of our trunk. It also helps in the lateral flexion and lateral extension, and it helps in the rotation of our trunk. So based upon these functions of the thoracic region, we will be performing different mobility drills to get a better range with these movements. So to sum up all this, the basic purpose of thoracic mobility is to get a good overhead position, because even when you raise your arm upward, even for the shoulder flexion, you need almost 10 to 13 degrees of thoracic extension so that you can raise your arm upward properly without putting much stress on your lower back. But if you don't have a good thoracic mobility, then your overhead movement will look like this. You will put excess strain on your lower back, and the lack of thoracic mobility will demand that mobility from the lower back, and your overhead movement will look like this. So this is the bad movement which will put excessive stress on your lower back. So if you have thoracic mobility, then it should look like this. So this is how you can check whether you have the thoracic mobility or not. If your overhead movement is looking like this, then you lack the thoracic mobility because it's demanding that mobility from your lower back. If it's looking like this, then you have some good mobility drills. But even if you pass with this test, then also you must practice the thoracic mobility drills, because it will help you to improve the range through the different functions as we discussed till now, and it will also help you with the different exercises which demands more thoracic mobility. So I hope I gave you a complete clarity related to the thoracic region and why we need the thoracic mobility. Now let's look into the different exercises and how to perform them to improve your thoracic mobility range. To perform the thoracic extension using a foam roller, first you have to posteriorly tilt your pelvis so that your lower back is fixed as you perform the thoracic extension, as our aim is to extend our upper back as much as possible and not the lower back. Then you have to place the foam roller over your mid back and you can roll till your upper back. Then from here you can support your head using your hand and then perform a movement similar to the crunch by rounding your upper back as much as is possible for you. The same exercise can also be performed by keeping your arms inward and then maintaining that posterior tilt, performing the same movement as we discussed earlier. As we are keeping the arms inward here, we will be moving that scapula outward and exposing our thoracic spine more with this version. With this variation, you have to posteriorly tilt your pelvis and keep that lower back fixed and then perform the thoracic extension on the foam roller, keeping your arm overhead. This will be slightly difficult than the previous 2 versions since the arms are overhead here, but our aim is not to reach the arm towards the floor but to get maximum extension at our mid-back. Now to get more extension at the overhead position, we can also hold some weights in our hands while performing the thoracic extension. But make sure that you're keeping your lower back fixed and allowing that weight to move your arm closer to the floor without tilting your pelvis and keeping that lower back fixed. To perform the cat curve, you have to first start with the quadrille position where your arms and legs are on the floor. Then from here you have to curve your spine, imagining that you have to touch that spine onto the ceiling, making a big C and getting maximum flexion at your spine. Then again you have to curve your spine in a downward direction, imagining that you have to touch that rib cage onto the floor, getting the maximum extension of your spine. So the aim of this exercise is to get the maximum extension and the flexion of the thoracic spine without changing the hip position. This one is similar to the cat cow, but here we are not only performing the thoracic extension and flexion, but we are also performing the rotation. So to perform this exercise, the basic idea is that you have to move your chest in a clockwise and anti-clockwise direction, and you will see that you will get the maximum rotation at your thoracic spine. This one is the overhead version of the cat cow, where you will be placing your arms approximately at a knee height, and then keeping your hips fixed, you will be performing the cat cow. So here you will make sure that your lower back is not moving, you are just rounding your upper back. If this variation is getting difficult for you and putting more strain on your shoulders, then you can move your hands forward and get a bit more support. To perform this exercise, you have to lie down on the floor sideways while keeping both the knees over each other. Then placing your right hand on the floor, you have to rotate without moving your hips and try to touch your left palms onto the floor. It's fine if you're not able to touch that left palm onto the floor, but make sure that you're not rotating your hips while performing this movement. In this variation, you can extend your lower leg and place the upper leg's knee over a foam roller such that your hips are always parallel and it's not rotating while you are performing this movement. Then you have to perform the same movement while keeping your right hand on the floor. You have to rotate and try to reach that left palms and touch it onto the floor. But make sure that you are not rotating your hips and not lifting that left knee from the foam roller. This variation is a bit challenging one. So here, instead of foam roller, you are placing that knee on the floor and then performing the rotation and trying to reach the left palm onto the floor. So even if you are not able to touch the left palm onto the floor, but make sure that you are not lifting that knee or rotating at your hips. You can also use this variation to check whether you are improving your thoracic mobility or not. So one day if you are able to touch that palm onto the floor, that means that you have improved your thoracic mobility. Here you have to bend the front knee and keep it touched onto the wall. Then placing your arms forward, you have to reach that left arm towards the wall by rotating at your torso and not at your hips. Here the positioning of the legs would be same as that of the previous variation, but instead of rotating the left arm, here you will be making a big circle using a right arm. This will check the thoracic rotational mobility of your right side. You can also make a small thoracic mobility wall flow using the previous two variations. So for the first rep, you have to reach that left arm towards the wall, then you have to rotate that right arm making the big circles. So here you have to alternate between these two variations and keep on doing it until you feel the suppleness over your thoracic region. To perform this exercise, you have to come onto a quadruped position, but here I generally tend to keep my hips slightly backward so that it's not rotating while I rotate my torso. Then placing your right arm over your head, you have to rotate your torso as much as is possible for you without rotating your hips. This will ensure the good thoracic rotational mobility. The same variation can also be performed by adding some resistance through the resistance band. So you can anchor the resistance band onto the floor and perform the same variation as we did earlier. So here you will be getting a resisted rotation while stretching those scapular muscles and engaging those lat muscles to get that thoracic rotation. So you are not only just getting the rotation but also activating the muscles which will be involved in the thoracic rotation. Here you have to hold a stick in your hands and then place your elbows over an elevated surface approximately around your knee height. Then maintaining your hips in line with the elbows and without curving your lower back, you have to flex and extend your elbows. This will ensure a good extension at your thoracic region if you don't curve your lower back. So the idea here is to get the maximum extension at your thoracic region and not at the lumbar region.
Here the positioning of the elbows and the hips would be same, but you will be maintaining the elbows flexed and then perform the similar movement as we did for the cat cow while getting the maximum extension and flexion at your thoracic region and maintaining that hips and the lower back constantly neutral.
If you are very poor with your thoracic mobility, then I would say that you must practice these exercises at least 3 to 4 times a week. And if you are at a good or average range, then you can do it 2 to 3 times a week separately. But if you never want to lose the thoracic range which you have improved by practicing these mobility drills, then I would suggest that you add 2 or 3 mobility drills which you found effective into your warm-up routine. This will ensure a good thoracic range whenever you are performing your exercises and also increase the suppleness around your thoracic region. So if you found this video helpful, then like this video, share with everyone and subscribe to my channel for more such informative videos on workout and nutrition. And if you wish to train with us, then check out the supplestrength.com where we provide evidence-based nutrition as well as workout coaching to enhance human performance. So we'll meet in the next video. Till then, stay supple, stay strong.